Welcome to Unit 3, Activity 3, Simple Linear Regression and Correlation Analysis. We are going to take a short look at simple linear regression and correlation analysis and how it can help us examine relationships between two variables. So when we plot something with a scatter plot, we're describing things visually. Simple linear regression creates a mathematical model. So let's take a look at three scenarios. So it's reasonable to speculate that there are relationships between things. So for example, we may have the number of gasoline liters sold at a service station and the volume of traffic passing by its location. It's a good question to ask. Or the number of meals sold in a company cafeteria and the number of company employees at that company. Or finally, what are the advertising expenditures and the sales revenues for a particular company? So we've got those three possible relationships. Now we have to think about a few other terms. So first of all, we've got our x and y variables. We're used to them. X is for the x-axis, y is for the y-axis. However, now we have to think about something called dependent and independent. So dependent variables depend on independent variables. Typically, we put dependent on the y-axis and independent on the x-axis. Now, simple linear regression analysis constructs a mathematical model that allows us to predict the value of the dependent variable using the independent variable, or vice versa. Now, the crucial first step in any analysis involving linear regression is that we have to figure out which of our variables is dependent and which is independent. So, does the first variable depend on the second variable, or does the second variable depend on the first variable? Now, our independent variable, you have to remember, is the one that we are in charge of. We are manipulating it. The dependent variable is the one that we're interested in. We are trying to find out what its response is. This is a classic science experiment. So now let's take a look at some of the scenarios that were given to us. So first of all, we have found it quite reasonable to speculate that there's a relationship between the number of liters of gas sold in a service station and the volume of traffic passing a location. So, does the number of liters of gas sold depend on the volume of traffic? Or does the volume of traffic depend on the liters of gas sold? So it's quite reasonable for us to say that question 1 is the better question. It's the more reasonable question. The number of liters gas sold depends on the volume of traffic. The volume of traffic will not depend on the liters of gas sold. That would just simply be a coincidence. Now, we've got our other questions. So let's take a look at the third one. Does the advertising expenditure depend on the sales revenue, or does the sales revenue depend on the advertising expenditure? Ask any business person, and they're going to tell you that sales will depend on the advertising. Now, it's not a perfect relationship, but it's pretty obvious that if you don't advertise, you're not going to sell something. So you're not going to be spending money advertising things based off of your sales. It's the other way around. Okay, let's continue. I was distracted there for a moment. Now, so just to finish off, we have our dependent variable y and our independent variable x. Make sure that you know what those two are. When you are constructing simple linear regressions, you can do it very quickly using any of the three tools I've shown you so far: Fathom, Excel, or Google Docs. If you are doing a more complex curvilinear model, you can use Microsoft Excel or Google Docs, and I'll show you an example of how to use Google Docs to create a formula for your line or your curve. I discovered how to do that very recently. Coming up next will be a video on the least squares method for doing linear regression. It's basic linear regression. And we'll also go through an example or two using Microsoft Excel and Google Docs.